All right, y'all, we're finally at part 5 of the decline of new releases in sneaker resale. And that's actually the name of part 5. The series has been about how I'm analyzing StockX's state of resale report. But this fifth section, the final section, which I could have extended it longer, but I didn't. This fifth section is about the decline of the new releases in sneaker resale. So let's get started. StockX, since I'm using all of the data from there, StockX is a private company with a massive amount of fundraising under its belt. The company is moving into a position where there won't be another funding round. StockX will have to IPO. Now, what does all of that mean in just this initial start? A funding round happens when you're a privately owned company and you receive funding from outside sources. You can go through certain funding rounds, and once you get to a point where the company is, you know, where no one else can come in and invest in it without diluting the value, that's going to be the end point of where you can do a fundraising round. StockX is pretty much at that end point. The only way they're going to give the initial investors their money back, which would be like Dan Snyder and all of these people, Eminem, all of these people that came in and invested, they're going to have to IPO. Now, when they didn't get rid of when Josh Luber, I think that's his name. I hope I got that right. When he stepped down, the guy that founded Campless, when he stepped down from StockX and they brought in Scott Cutler, I assumed that the IPO was going to be imminent, that it was going to happen quickly. It did not. And obviously that may have something to do with COVID and, the quarantine and all of the stuff from 2020. I think there is an IPO imminent. But let's get back to this discussion, the decline of new releases of sneaker resale. And in the first post in this series, I explained why StockX implemented guardrails to offset a slow market. Throughout this series, I've attempted to explain how resale is cooled and why. It's critical to provide data from StockX to show how the market is finally in its correction phase. Now, the correction phase is a good thing. I'm not saying that's negative. First, though, however, context is required and more history. And I've been giving you a lot of history through this podcast. And hopefully you get where I'm going with this. New releases have always been interesting to track. They offer insight to how resale has changed year over year. Now, when I started Should You Buy the Flip, when I started that series, no one in sneaker media, no one was doing that type of article. I created a formula which allowed me to choose which sneakers I could use to gauge brand heat. When I turned the series over to House of Kicks, a site created by a mathematician, he developed a stronger method of rating kicks. Today, every major sneaker YouTuber is attempting to analyze new releases and do sit or flip and different types of articles like that. Although the new sneakers aren't hitting the way they were 3 years ago. So when I started doing this article is 8 years old. There's some older than that. This was my check. I would do, the first check would be to check on Flight Club and look at the shoes there. And then the second check would be to go to eBay and look at the check there. You can come to the website and look up this article on Should You Buy the Flip, and this is about the Black Cat 6, right? But I would do these checks, these 3 checks, and then I'd come up with a final ruling of whether you should flip this. And 8 years ago, when the Black Cat 6 came out, I said that you don't have the money to sit on them. Do yourself a favor and skip the flip. That was the kind of outcome. But like I said, no one was writing those type of articles. If you're new to my station, you probably knew about them, but more than likely most people didn't know about them. But since these shoes aren't kind of hitting the way they used to, and with the new releases, a lot of the sneaker YouTubers are finding themselves at a point where it doesn't make sense for them to continue to do these sit or flip articles. Because it's obvious if something is super limited, then it's going to have some value. If you got a Travis Scott, you're going to make some money, right? If we get back to the state of resale from StockX, this 2024 report, this is what they said. And I'm going to give you 3 quotes from what they said. The sneaker resale market isn't dead. Despite headlines claiming otherwise, StockX data shows a diversified portfolio of brands that are locking in the top spots for year-over-year growth. Now, you can continue to read that, but the main point is the sneaker resale market isn't dead, and that's from StockX's State of Resale. Their second point, sneaker innovation is king. The days of relying on one silhouette no longer drives heat across an entire brand. The Nike Dunk, as an example, formerly reigned supreme, but data shows a dip in popularity with trades down 41% year over year. I would say it's lower than that. So you have like there, and then they continue to talk about sneaker innovation is king. And I'm going to explain all of these points that StockX has made in their State of Resale. Their third point, celebrity athletes for the win. Signature sneaker lines held by legacy NBA giants Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Kevin Durant drove Nike performance basketball. That category was up 46% year over year. The Mamba mentality starts in the soul with the Kobe Pro Tour in the lead with a 512% trade increase, followed by Devin Booker's Book One. Now, this is the thing. The Book One for 2024, and the idea that they're saying that it had this growth, there was no Book One the previous year. Very few of those shoes were out and about in the world. So, of course, the Book One is going to show a bigger jump. Then they said that the KD was third, and the WNBA is also heating up with superstar Sabrina Ionescu's signature Sabrina 1 silhouette, garnering new attention relative to launch. And they said there were over 3,000 new trades year to date. I could go on, but I want to stick with what I'm reading here so we can follow along. Now, going back to what they've said about the sneaker resale market isn't dead, sneaker innovation is king, and they said the days of relying on one silhouette, that is the most important line in the statements that they've made. That's the most important line. And it's a direct shot at Nike and the Dunk and Jordan and the Air Jordan 1. Now, let's go back to prior to StockX's arrival. When I did this Should You Buy the Flip, and my first check was with Flight Club, this is the way things used to be 20 years ago when Flight Club first opened. People would go and look at what's happening on Flight Club, and then they would consign out to Flight Club, or they would go to eBay, which my second check was eBay. And then my third check was like a combination of Twitter. And then StockX had just launched at this time 8 years ago. 9 years ago was when they first launched. Now, I bring this up because prior to StockX's arrival, and by default, GOAT's arrival and Grail's arrival and other digital resale platforms, prior to those places, resale required a more thoughtful approach. Now, there were sellers who knew the Jordan 11 Christmas release was going to pop, or the Black Friday Jordan drop was going to perform well. And those sellers had the money to buy as many as possible. But true business people, not saying that the people had the money or not true business people, but if you didn't have a ton of money, you had to be a lot more savvy and you had to really be a business. True business people before StockX relied on a more nuanced approach involving a diverse product mix. So it was important, if you didn't have a ton of money, to look for the best deals. So what you have to remember is that the reseller at one point was additive to the market. In other words, the reseller was beneficial to stores at one point. Later, they became reductive. They took away from stores. They took away from customers. If you revisit the time before StockX, you can find a foundation to the discussion about new sneakers and resale. But more importantly, we have to go back to pre-StockX to look at how the market worked before we move forward with this 2023 and 2024 data that we've just gone through. We have to look backwards. So I'm revisiting the Curry 3, and I wrote this post 10 years ago. 8 years ago, I wrote this post. No one else probably could have written this post 8 years ago. No one else could have written it because I was taking risk on things because it was an assistance thing with managers that I knew at certain stores. So when I revisit the Curry 3, right? And you see this chart next to me. If you can't see it and you're listening to this, this is UA Curry 3, and it shows sales on eBay, and it shows completed listings and sold listings. So the current listings at this time, 8 years ago with the Under Armour Curry 3, there were 842 listings, 597 completed listings, 416 sold listings. And the eBay, the average sold price for the Curry 3 men's shoe was $106.69, which was a loss at that time. All right. So in this post, I actually come back and I give you a completely different data set. And the data set that I give you was based on Curry 3 sales on Amazon, which is where I was at this time. There was no StockX. And even if there was, Curry's didn't necessarily flip on StockX. This is a time prior to the hype that's around sneaker resale. It was kind of a thing that people did who knew what they were doing. And that's my whole point. That's what I'm getting at. When you revisit the Curry 3, 2016, StockX was just coming around. It was in motion. But the site was just a slice of what it is today. It was a sliver. Sellers had to utilize Amazon, eBay, Kixify, or other consignment shops like Stadium Goods or Flight Club. Sneaker reselling was speculative. It was speculative. All right. You did have Campless who was trying to feed data, but it was only on hype stuff. It was more of a business, but it was a lot more speculative. All right. So it required planning, purchasing, customer service, handling returns. New releases were truly like initial public offerings, as sellers were at the mercy of the market, and the seller relied on brands to create interest for a release. Sneaker blogs were important. Your Nice Kicks, your Sneaker News, all of these different sites, they were important. But the purchasing decisions of regular everyday consumers remained a function of the marketing strategy of the companies that made the sneakers. The distribution strategies, since not every area in the US received allotments of certain shoes, the distribution strategies were important. And looking at the Under Armour Curry 3, right, and that's what I'm going on here, looking at the Curry 3, it provides an interesting look into how a new release could perform on the third-party marketplace prior to StockX, right? So when looking at the Curry, I looked at a few metrics, right? This is what I did when I had this Curry 3, and I had total pair in inventory was 86. Sold listings, I had 42. Men's, the retail price was $140. I was capable of selling the Curry 3 at $189.99. Did you catch that? The retail price was $140. I sold them at $190. The kids' price was $126.35, which is the average sold price on Amazon. My average sold price was $158.91. So actually, the retail price on the Curry 3, I think, was $130. It might have been $120. So what I'm talking about here is the average sold price on Amazon and the average sold price that I had. I far outperformed the marketplace on the Curry shoe. So why is that? This is what I did. And can you do this today? Yeah, you probably could do this today. But it required a lot of knowledge. And these are the things that I did. These are the things that I did when I was looking at the Curry 3. I looked at these metrics. The brand was coming off of the loss of the Sports Authority. So Under Armour had a lot of shoes with Sports Authority and it went bankrupt. That bankruptcy left Under Armour looking to create more accounts. Now, just because they wanted to create these accounts, this didn't happen quickly. The Curry 3 was not a hyped release. Under Armour was overlooked. Remember, 2016 is when Yeezy popped up and Adidas and the NMD was popping. The Ultra Boost was popping. Nike was struggling a little bit. There was room for the Curry, but it wasn't doing that well. Resellers at that time didn't even think about Under Armour and the Curry 3 as an option. They didn't even look at the shoe. Only sellers who actively worked in retail and resale and wholesale knew there was an opportunity. Now, I saw the fact that Under Armour wasn't available in many retail outlets. So I began to acquire the Curry 3. I started to take them on. I was like, you know what? They're not available at a lot of different places. Nobody else is paying attention to them. I can get 100 pair of these shoes. This is what you have to remember. Steph was a champion, and there was demand. But Under Armour had reduced the amount of advertising for Curry shoes. They weren't advertising Curry shoes. As a matter of fact, they went from 16 campaigns with the Curry 1 down to 2 campaigns for the Curry 3. Under Armour had also just faced the Chef Curry 2.5 debacle, the low-top white Curry shoe. And the brand basically left a sneaker in the hands of Curry's basketball career. So you have this shoe, and I'm mentioning all of this to establish one thing. New releases and resale had a place, but only when a number of circumstances came together. The Curry thing was unlike the post-COVID resale boom and new releases back before 2016. It was unlike the new sneaker resale that exists. That post-COVID resale boom where every dunk and every Jordan 1 mid or low hit resale numbers, that was crazy. When I purchased that Curry 3 shoe at SRP, it was a very calculated plan which relied on poor distribution. I live in Memphis. I'm in a Nike crazy city. The Curry 3 wasn't selling at all in this city. I was able to move the new release without disrupting the market by monopoly. And what do I mean by monopoly? The next section is do not pass go monopoly. So let's get to the next section of this discussion. And I'm moving quickly, and I hope you're keeping up, and I hope this is all clear.